Before starting the video, let us know where you're watching from and what time you're watching. The House That Eats Dreams. Prologue. The legend of the house at 23 Blackthorn Lane was whispered across generations in the small town of Millhaven. Parents warned their children to never go near it, claiming it devoured those who dared to dream too boldly. The house, with its cracked facade and gnarled vines choking its walls, stood as a silent sentinel of nightmares. The townsfolk said it wasn't just haunted, it was alive, a predator waiting patiently for its next victim. Chapter 1: The Dare. It was a cold autumn evening when 16-year-old Ethan Parker found himself standing at the rustic gate of the infamous house. The air was thick with mist, and the overgrown garden exuded an eerie silence. His heart thudded in his chest, but he refused to let his fear show. It was, after all, a dare. "You're not chickening out, are you?" teased Jake, his best friend, from behind him. Jake's grin was as wide as the moon, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Of course not," Ethan snapped, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. The other kids from their high school gathered behind Jake, their laughter and jeers fueling Ethan's determination. "Just go inside, stay for 10 minutes, and come back out," said Sarah, her voice trembling slightly. "It's easy." Easy, Ethan thought bitterly, staring at the blackened windows of the house. The warped wooden door seemed to leer at him, daring him to cross the threshold. He took a deep breath and pushed the gate open. It screeched loudly, as if screaming a warning. Chapter 2: The Entrance. The interior of the house smelled of decay and mildew. Dust motes swirled in the dim light streaming through the cracked windows. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing strange, claw-like patterns etched into the wood beneath. Each step Ethan took echoed unnaturally, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. He glanced back at the doorway, but the mist outside had thickened, obscuring the view of his friends. 10 minutes, he whispered to himself. The living room was sparsely furnished with a threadbare armchair and a crooked coffee table. A shattered mirror hung on the far wall, reflecting the warped image of the room. Something about the mirror made his skin crawl. He felt watched, though he was alone. As Ethan's eyes roamed the room, he noticed a journal lying on the floor, its leather cover worn and cracked. Curiosity overpowered his fear, and he picked it up. The pages were filled with frantic handwriting, the words spiraling into incoherent ramblings. One phrase was repeated over and over: "The house eats dreams." A sudden creak from above made Ethan's breath hitch. He froze, straining to hear. The sound came again, louder this time, as if someone was moving upstairs. Chapter 3: The Keeper of Dreams. Ethan's pulse raced, but his feet seemed to move of their own accord. He climbed the rickety staircase, each step groaning under his weight. The air grew colder with each step, his breath visible in the dim light. At the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched before him, lined with doors. Most were shut, but one at the far end stood ajar. A faint, golden light spilled out, flickering like a dying candle. Ethan's instinct screamed at him to leave, but his legs carried him forward. He pushed the door open and stepped into a small room. The walls were covered in children's drawings, but they were twisted and nightmarish, faceless figures, shadowy monsters, and the house itself with gaping windows that resembled eyes. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate bed, its canopy draped in cobwebs. A figure sat on the edge of the bed. It was a woman, her face hidden by a veil of tangled black hair. Her thin, pale hands clutched a doll that looked eerily similar to Ethan. "You came," she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to echo in his mind. "The house has been waiting." Ethan stumbled back, but the door slammed shut behind him. The woman's head snapped up, and he saw her eyes, voids of endless blackness, pulling him in. Chapter 4: The House's Hunger. "What do you want?" Ethan demanded, his voice shaking. The woman tilted her head as if amused. "It's not what I want," she said. "It's what the house wants. It feeds on dreams, on hopes, on the very essence of who you are." "That's ridiculous," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. She rose from the bed, her movements unnaturally fluid, like a marionette. "You brought your dreams with you," she whispered, "and now they're mine." Ethan felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if something was being ripped from him. Images flashed before his eyes, his dream of becoming an artist, his hopes of traveling the world, the memory of his mother encouraging him to never give up. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The room darkened, the walls seeming to close in. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his head as his dreams were devoured. Chapter 5. Escape. Just as he thought he would lose himself completely, a voice broke through the darkness. "Ethan, Ethan, wake up." He opened his eyes to see Sarah standing over him, her face pale with fear. "You've been gone too long. We came in to find you." Ethan blinked, disoriented. He was back in the living room, the journal lying at his feet. The woman was gone, but her presence lingered like a shadow in his mind. "We need to go," Sarah said urgently, pulling him to his feet. The group stumbled out of the house, the oppressive mist parting as they crossed the threshold. Ethan's lungs burned as he gulped in the fresh air, but something felt off. The world seemed duller, the colors less vibrant. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. In the weeks that followed, Ethan struggled to feel anything. His passion for art was gone, his sketchbooks abandoned. He barely spoke to his friends, who seemed to have forgotten the events of that night. The house had taken something from him, and he knew it would never return. One evening, he found himself drawn back to 23 Blackthorn Lane. The house loomed before him, unchanged, its windows glinting like hungry eyes. In his hand was the journal, the phrase "the house eats dreams" etched into his mind. He stepped through the gate, knowing he would never leave again. The house had claimed him, just as it had claimed so many before. Epilogue. Years later, the legend of 23 Blackthorn Lane continued to grow. New whispers circulated about a boy who had dared to enter and never returned. Some claimed to see his face in the windows, his eyes hollow and haunted. The house remained, waiting patiently for its next victim, for the next dream to devour.